Welcome to today's episode. Our guest is Mtamanika Youngblood, a powerful voice in Atlanta's civic and cultural life. From her leadership in the King Historic District to her work advancing community development, preservation, and equality, she has been at the forefront of shaping neighborhoods and protecting legacies. Join us as we dive into her journey, her vision for Atlanta, and the stories that keep the dream alive. The conversation begins now.
Hi, welcome to Thaddaus Dawson Speaks. Liberation through valuation and soul meets soil. Today we have a guest that I am so happy. Let me just inhale and exhale real quick so I don't fanboy out. She is a land trust legend, civil rights icon, and the queen of Atlanta Land Trust, Miss Mtamanika Youngblood. I am so thankful. I'm not going to say how blessed I am because in my episode with Miss Shirley Sherrod, I said blessed 100 times and folks told me not to say that. So I am going to not say that today, but I am feeling very warm and bubbly and very thankful and grateful that she's taking out time to spend with us today. So I can just listen to her just for hours on end. She was a part of New Communities in Albany, Georgia. She was the first executive director there. She then came to Atlanta and started the first land trust at the behest of Miss Coretta Scott King. Her resume is endless. She was a part of the Beltline, Auburn Avenue development. I'm going to shut up and just let her talk and listen. Miss Mtamanika Youngblood, thank you for coming on today.
Well, you're quite welcome. I mean, I like to talk, so this should be easy.
And our conversations tend to go on, and I had a couple of messages for you. When I saw Miss Sherrod, I told her that you said hello, and she told me to tell you hello. So that's first and foremost. And then I was talking to Professor Oscar Sistrunk from Morehouse College, MAI, a good friend and mentor. Mm-hmm. He talked about how amazing you were and told me to tell you hello. And he talked about all of your legendary work. And he was like, wow, how did you get her? She moved to California. I said, well, I know some people that know some people. And I was blessed to be able to make this happen.
Okay, well, I appreciate all those greetings. I mean, you know, I want to be really clear that what I've been able to do in this world and in this life has never been without, you know, steadfast supporters, friends, colleagues, and, you know, sisters and brothers in the struggle. So I appreciate all of that.
I mean, you were there with everybody in the midst, and I'll tell you, just like I told Mrs. Sherrod, what's in the water down in Albany? Because that vibranium is strong. Y'all ain't looking like none of the challenges that y'all have been through.
Well, let me begin this conversation with the fact that I really do strive to be impeccable in my word, which is the first agreement of the four. And so let me make some corrections. I was not the executive director at New Communities.
Okay.
That was not my job.
I know you started as an intern.
Not my role. Okay.
Okay.
And the Historic District Development Corporation, started by Coretta Scott King, was not a community land trust. Okay. It was a nonprofit organization that was a community development corporation.
Okay.
So let's just
get all those corrections. I need.
I want to be clear. So, but I mean, it for me, I mean, and for a lot of people, it may not make much difference. Of course, it does matter that, you know, I not represent myself to have been in a role I was not.
That was me misrepresenting you and
That is correct. And so I want to be clear. That was not my role. But you know, I was there when, you know, I was in the room.
But you started as an intern.
Yeah. Well, why don't you ask me the question, because this is a hard. Ask me some questions, because to be honest, I have to go way, 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 way back, and it will take too long.
Okay, okay, all right. Well, in your journey of all of these civil rights icons who are your contemporaries, who was your favorite?
Oh my, that's almost an unfair question. I mean, I mean, how wide do I mean Malcolm X? See, you
He,
didn't expect that. That's not the answer you expected.
oh, but look who's sitting behind me.
So
No. But
I don't,
that's why I always fan out when I talk to you.
it's Malcolm, clearly, but and as a matter of fact, I wish you were. Anyway,
So was that was from your time in New
okay,
York?
so all right, well, since you started with new communities, let's just go there. So, without going into the long history, frankly, of how I got to new communities, let's just say that, it was at the time, a remarkable place. It was in, technically, New Communities was located in Lee County, Georgia, right outside Albany.
Okay.
The Southwest Georgia Project, which was SNCC's Southwest Georgia Project, which is where I left New York and school. I graduated from NYU, and within 3, 4 months, I went to work for SNCC in Southwest Georgia. The office and the nexus of the Southwest Georgia Project was in Albany, Georgia, but New Communities, which was a subsidiary, a project of the Southwest Georgia Project, was in Lee County, okay, which was a much more rural county. Obviously, there were 5,700 acres of farmland there, which was not the case in Albany. Okay?
So your relationship with Malcolm started in New York.
Yes. Yes.
So that
So, okay. Yeah. So, but we don't have time for that. I can tell you. That's
okay. All right.
we won't get to what you want to talk about if we delve into that.
So we're gonna come back to that in
We
a
can
later
come back to
episode.
that, but I
Okay.
really, because my sense is you really want to talk about community land trusts, given the recent conversation you had with Shirley, with Mrs. Sherrod, I think let's try to stay on topic to the extent that that's possible.
Let's keep my
Uh,
ADD right here.
yeah. Okay. So because I mean, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. We won't get to what you.
I want to get to whatever you want to get to, and
Well,
we'll tackle land
this is
trust.
your
Then,
show.
then
So.
we'll come back later on for the Malcolm conversation. But your experience is across all of the civil rights organizations and leaders, and you carved out your place, urban, rural, and the things that you did at New Communities was very important. Your work with the Sherrods, with SNCC, but let's fast forward because we've already kind of hit that. So I want to talk
Okay.
about Atlanta, and I mean your vision for the Old Fourth Ward, your vision for the Beltline, your vision for the Beltline being a land trust opportunity to create affordable housing, where things are today, which are absolutely beautiful, and how they lined up with your vision and intent, and your disappointments, your likes, all of the above.
Okay. All right. So it's important for me to talk about, to some extent, the experience of new communities, and the related work of organizations like the Federation of Southern Co-ops, the Emergency Land Fund, those organizations really, which in working with new communities, I ultimately had some connection to, and learned mostly from, really set the path for me in my work in Atlanta. And so frankly, I share this with people when I talk about it. I didn't know that New Communities, when I was there, was the first community land trust in the country. I did not know that. I knew what the goals were, and I was committed to and worked 7 days a week on the effort to build a community that was community owned. That included the land, the processes, the agriculture, the housing, the education. All of that effort was to build a new community. I didn't know that it had a name at the time, Community Land Trust. I was unaware.
It was the first one in the country, and now it's modeled in 49 states.
That's correct.
Across the country.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm
but
just
you
saying,
had a hand in it. How does that?
I was committed to the work. I was committed to the outcome, to the result. The community land trust model is a mechanism for the result I was looking for. And so while that was the construct, that's not how we talked about it. We didn't talk about it being the first community land trust in the country. We talked about it being literally a new community.
Okay. Now, can we come up
north a little bit? We can go to it. So my sense of ownership, community-based ownership, of the importance of land ownership, that perspective is grounded in the work that I did at New Communities. So it launched me. Okay, so it launched
Atlanta.
In terms of how I worked in Atlanta, which frankly was kind of serendipitous in some ways. I ended up living in Sweet Auburn because my husband and I wanted to live in town in a Black community and someplace that was close to downtown, and where our neighbors were Black people. We had been living in the suburbs and we wanted something different. And so that frankly was the motivation. But because of who we were, when we got there, thinking that someone was going to revitalize this, at the time, very scary and mostly unlivable community, we realized that if anybody was going to make things better, mainly, I want to be clear about the original motivation for what I call them, the community treasures, the mostly elderly, senior, mostly women, there were some couples and some men, people who were left in the community and were afraid to come out of their houses because of the state of the neighborhood. And so our motivation was not so much to revitalize the neighborhood, but to make it better for them. We just felt like they deserved to live in a neighborhood that really was representative of Dr. King. Okay?
Got it.
Let's start it. Okay. Got there, because I was working for corporate America at the time. Got there and realized that, if we didn't do something a lot more intensive, we were going to lose this really important community to drug dealers or who knows who. So that's kind of how we ended up in Sweet Auburn. Now, once it became obvious that we really needed to do something, the mechanism for that kind of was revealed to us when we were asked to join the board of the Historic District Development Corporation, which had been started 4 years earlier by Coretta Scott King.
Oh, okay. Now we got the timeline.
Okay, so but she started it as a community development corporation. There was a one or maybe two sentence mission statement, which was to revitalize the residential and commercial properties in the Martin Luther King Historic District, which at the time was the name of the district that had been created by Congress in honor of Dr. King, with Mrs. King's push and efforts to make that happen. So that was the mission, and we bought into that because once we got there, we realized who was there and how important the neighborhood was. We couldn't just be residents. We couldn't
What
just
does that area encompass? Is that the whole Fourth Ward? And
no. So this is kind of complicated, and why folks sometimes are confused about it. So the old Fourth Ward, which is the only neighborhood in Atlanta that retains its ward nomenclature,
okay,
because the city had wards. The old Fourth Ward is the only one that retained its nomenclature. Now there are neighborhoods. They have names.
So was that because of that? That's where Dr. King was, and the King.
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
It just the neighborhood never felt the need. It's the only way I can characterize this, to change its name. So there was no effort on behalf of the residents of the old Fourth Ward to change its name to, I don't know, pick a neighborhood, Druid Hills or whatever.
To see the neighborhood today as opposed to when you first got there.
You can't. It's just not. Literally night and day is the appropriate and accurate description. Okay.
And it's just
okay.
You go ahead.
Okay. So I want to answer your question because I think it's helpful and illuminating for folks to understand kind of what the territory is we're talking about. Okay, so the old Fourth Ward is the larger neighborhood. Inside of the old Fourth Ward is a neighborhood, an historic district called Sweet Auburn. Okay, now inside of Sweet Auburn is a smaller district, the Martin Luther King Historic District, which was originally created by Congress, by an act of Congress, but it only included from Jackson to what was Randolph, and Edgewood to Irwin, which is a very tiny piece, and left out some really important pieces of what molded Dr. King. Now, Mrs. King gave Congress the boundaries, but as was the case in those days, and apparently is now the case in these days, Congress went away, came back and did something different, and came back with a smaller, much more irregular, and really illogical boundary for the Martin Luther King Historic District. So you have the old Fourth Ward, you have Sweet Auburn, you have the Martin Luther King Historic District, and then inside the district is the site, which is the park that the Park Service says grace over. And that's that's a few blocks, basically.
So the Park Service
is talking about so at any point in time, you can use any of those descriptors to talk about the neighborhood.
Okay.
Is that clear? Is that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. And
okay?
so I guess I was under the impression that the Park Service was responsible for the whole area. The Park Service is only responsible for,
It's a
uh,
very tiny piece.
and they do the policing and what all are they
It's a
responsible
park.
for?
It's a park.
So it's a
It's
national
like
park.
Yellowstone. It's like it's a park.
Okay.
Okay, it's an urban park, but it's a park, and they have purview over it. Okay, so but it is a tiny piece, and there are implications for that. But it's a tiny piece of actually the historic district, the Auburn Avenue, Sweet Auburn rather, and the Old Fourth Ward. It's
Okay.
got concentric circles.
So the demographics have changed in the neighborhood
Yeah. Okay.
tremendously.
Tremendously. Okay. So, um, given my history and worldview as a result of the work of new communities and the Southwest Georgia Project, and as I said, the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and the Emergency Land Fund, and those organizations, it occurred, it was incumbent on me, if I was going to work on behalf of the neighborhood, that I bring those principles to the neighborhood. So the one thing that was a non-negotiable as we were doing the work was that there would be no displacement of the existing residents who were there.
How's that worked out?
Whereas I described mostly elderly, almost 100% elderly, single women, few men, and a few couples. That was the neighborhood. That was the makeup of the neighborhood. Now, when I say neighborhood, I'm talking about the Martin Luther King Historic District part of the neighborhood.
Mm.
I'm not talking about the broader Old Fourth Ward at that point. Okay, so the focus of our efforts were actually, now when I think about how I would characterize that, looking back on it, was to recreate the neighborhood that birthed Dr. King, who, in my view, was, a phenomenal and a preeminent human being, and deserving of all the accolades and all the tribute, and certainly some representation of the beloved community in Atlanta that he advocated for. So that was our focus. It was the current neighborhood, especially given that literally at that point, thousands, it became a million, but thousands of people were coming to see the King Center, his crypt, and the house that he was born in. And once they got off Auburn Avenue, they were in an abyss. And it was not something that we and my neighbors, frankly, could abide. They knew how glorious the neighborhood was in the past and helped me understand that, and to a great extent guided how we recreated some of that, specifically the residential portion. They were the backbone for that. And so the effort was for people who were coming to the neighborhood to have some understanding and sense of the kind of neighborhood that birthed, literally, because his house is there, house he was born in is there, that birthed Dr. King. So that was the original emphasis and impetus. It became clear over time that we needed to be a lot more. The organization had already been in existence when I finally became the executive director, because I joined the board in the mid 80s and became the executive director in the early 90s. I was the first executive director of HDDC. That's true. But it became obvious, even when I was on the board and before I was the first paid staff person, that we needed to be more strategic about how we were going about recreating the neighborhood. We had already, with no staff and just a hardworking volunteer board, created 12 units of affordable housing. The problem was, it was great. We were, I became an historic preservationist in this process, but we retained the historic context and feel for the places that we did rehabilitate, but we did them in a kind of a way where it wasn't for sale, we'd buy it. Is it such a nuisance that we have to address it, because what's happening there is untenable for the little old ladies living around it. I mean, we didn't really have a strategy for how we were going to, frankly, revitalize. And so what we spent, and I had a lot to do with, we emphasized the need to be strategic about how we did what we did, because nobody knew it, except for the really lucky family that managed to get, one of our renovated houses. It was still just a scary neighborhood. And so the strategy, which was something I came up with at the time, called block by block, was to do an entire block at a time, so that there was enough context for people to feel safe.
Because did that give you the opportunity to work on your displacement, or because your block?
So displacement was like and because of the unwavering commitment we had made to our neighbors, that as we began more aggressively, frankly, to work on trying to save this community before it was completely lost, because it was created as an historic district in 79-ish, 1979-80, it was kind of no place anybody wanted to try to deal with, because you had to follow the Secretary of Interior standards for how you renovated the properties. And so a lot of the housing, which was built, I lived in a house that was built in 1893, okay? A lot of the housing was built 1895, late 1800s, early 1900s, and some of them were small shotguns, some were larger Victorians, but they were subject to oversight, in terms of how you can renovate them. And most folks didn't want to take that on. And as a result of that, once they became vacant, they basically deteriorated and eventually were demolished. So what we had when we got to the neighborhood was almost all the housing, 90% of it, dilapidated, substandard, and a lot of vacant lots where housing used to be, but it was demolished because nobody wanted to deal with it, because it had this requirement that it be renovated in a way that reflected its historic character. And for a lot of the housing, they were shotguns and bungalows and housing that, for the average developer, average for-profit developer, there was no way to get a return out of that effort. So nobody touched it. And the neighborhood just declined. Now, there are other reasons the neighborhood declined, but that was one of them. And that was that nobody wanted to tackle it.
You did.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm me. I know. I get that. I understand that. But nobody else did at the time. Now, obviously, that has changed. Obviously, that has changed. But at the time, nobody wanted to tackle
What are you most proud of there?
it. I can say unequivocally that we managed to completely revitalize that portion and ultimately larger portions, frankly, of the neighborhood in a way that did not displace the hardworking, long-term indigenous residents who were there, and involuntarily. So they were elder. I mean, when we got there, people thought we were youngsters. I was 40 years old, right? It's like we're not youngsters, but they just considered us young because the neighbor who lived, our wonderful neighbor who lived next door, Mrs. Goff, was 95 years old. The youngest neighbor on my block was Mrs. Taylor. She was across the street. I think she was in her late 70s. She was the youngest person. These were 80 and 90-year-old, mostly women. And so over time, they either passed away or moved to, nursing facilities or places where they could, live out the rest of their lives in a way that comported with their physical capacity. And so a lot of those homes were left to heirs who were not interested in.
That was my next question because we do a lot of stuff with heirs property, and right now we're going through the largest transfer.
We had to do 70 quick claims on it. 70.
And Black people are not participating in that at the level that they should. And my question was, what does that look like for those residents that you help to not displace? Are their families able to benefit and tap into that wealth?
Okay, so now we get to an earlier question. Because I'm most proud of, looping back, to the fact that our efforts were in some ways groundbreaking and set a template for how to do revitalization without displacement. So I am most proud of that. I'm unhappy with the end result in that the kind of folks, the hardworking, low income, decent families that were also part of this mixed income community, which was Dr. King's neighborhood, now cannot afford to live in that neighborhood that bears his name. And that has all to do with public policy, which I have no control over.
Was that something that you thought about when you were doing this, or you did? It was that something that...
Yes, not at first, not at first, and not at first. It took me a couple of years as I observed the houses that we were renovating so beautiful. We won awards for them. We did such a good job of renovating these old houses. And building new ones that looked like old houses, but they were new. We did such a good job of that once we got people into these really affordable houses, because we had to have a carrot to get folks into the neighborhood, because while that block we worked on at the time was great, the rest of the neighborhood was still kind of a scary place. Mm-hmm. And so as an incentive, we offered housing to folks that, the first house we built and sold was a 4 bedroom, 2 bath, 2-story house for $75,000.
How much would you say that house is worth today?
Probably close to $1 million. Somewhere between, I would say somewhere between, probably around $700,000. And I'm guessing because I'm going. That was in 1990. Sold the first new 95.
Where was the time frame, or what came next? Was it the Beltline?
Okay, no. Okay, so wait. All right, so a lot happened before the Beltline, um, but you know the so you know the history of the Beltline, so we're not going to take time to go into that. So because of my work in community, not just Old Fourth Ward, eventually it grew outside of the Old Fourth Ward in Atlanta. Um, I did work in Pittsburgh and you know, NPUV. And so, um, Ryan Graville and Kathy Woolard asked me, because, Ryan was the creator, thinker, the guy who thought of it, the Beltline. Kathy was at the time city council president, or maybe she was still just a council member. I think maybe she was just a council member, and was the head of the transportation committee in the council. So because the Beltline was kind of a transportation project, they were kind of like the two folks spearheading the idea. Ryan created it. Kathy was, at the city and on the council and could move it along as an idea that we needed to look into. And eventually they came to me to ask me to be a part of their group, their, whatever the name of it was. It'll come back to me. Friends of the Beltline, I think, or something. It's a long time ago. Sorry, I don't recall the name exactly. To be a part of it, to kind of make certain that the community voice was present in how the Beltline was developed, which would have been very different from everything else we ever developed in Atlanta.
When you say we, who is the we?
I take that. I need to fix that. That would have been different from anything else that had been developed in Atlanta.
So everything else didn't have a community voice.
Not that ended up in the implementation. I mean, you can check a box and say you had community input. The question is, what do you do with it?
And I guess what I'm always interested in is because your mission was so strong with making sure that the community was not displaced. Like you said, a lot of times I see the box checked and we get this percentage of affordability until that 10 years is up, and then there's no representation for the community in the long term. It's usually just more perfunctory and a bait and switch, for lack of a better
You
word.
are correct.
Do you feel like with your mission and what you thought, is there representation from the community still along the Beltline, or was that a missed opportunity?
That train, to use an analogy that's really appropriate here, that train has left the station.
And one of the unintended or intended consequences, it's like the prices along the Beltline have gone up so drastically and severely. There's no way that the legacy residents can even afford to stay with the increase of the property taxes, and the displacement was not well thought of. I think there should have been some level.
No, it was well thought of.
Oh, it just wasn't implemented. Okay.
Let's be clear. So I mean, we almost need to do a separate conversation on
that. Okay.
We really do, because there's so much that the average person and even people on the board of the Beltline are seemingly unaware of in terms of how this project even came to being and what its genesis was and what it was supposed to be. That we should have another conversation about that because we don't have enough time today.
But as I travel the country and I do this work, one of the biggest things that I'm looking into is generational wealth. And again, we're going through the largest transfer in history, $106 trillion, and Black people only participating in $3 trillion worth. And in Atlanta, you would think more than any place it would be more representative, but
We
Atlanta.
need to have another conversation about that too.
Okay, all right. So these are just
Well,
things.
and because, let me just say this, the two things are not unconnected. The fact that the Beltline ended up being, not the transformational project it was supposed to be, but just a real cool infrastructure project, which is
Oh, it's
what
an
it
amazing
was.
infrastructure project.
And I mean, that's not what it was intended. That was only part of it. That was like the hardscape part, not the softscape part, if I can use construction language. So the fact that the Beltline ended up being what it is, which was not transformational in terms of all the neighborhoods that were impacted by it in a way that would make life better for the residents of those neighborhoods, but instead just became another cool Atlanta infrastructure project, has all to do with the connection of why intergenerational wealth, or however you want to characterize the inequity that occurs in Atlanta, those things are connected. They're not disconnected. There's a reason for both that has its genesis in the same place.
So is that in policy and people not knowing, or is it ingrained in capitalism and folks starting to do one thing to get the funding because they always count on the tax benefits, all of the incremental things to subsidize the soft costs and the development, and it's always on the community's back, and the community does not get to participate in the fruits of their labor. Or
And who's accountable for that?
the
Who is
community,
accountable for
or
the
the
fact?
politicians, or the representatives. You tell me. I'm listening. I'm just here to learn.
Without going into a great deal of detail, because we're talking about, you know, more than just the Beltline here.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, whoever controls the purse, whoever said you can have this subsidy or we'll give you this subsidy, but you have to do this for it, that entity is accountable for the result of the use of that subsidy.
So that's where I always feel the community loses and is shortchanged. And so when one of my illustrations about land leasing and land trusts, I always like to use Great Britain and China, where they leased Hong Kong for 99 years. And it has to be a long-term strategy because when China got Hong Kong back in the late 90s, it was worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. I believe instead of selling to developers, if we could implement a long-term lease so they can recapture their capital, but it still maintains community control, and the city or the community owns the long-term real estate to make sure or ensure that the community is involved and not displaced after a short period of time.
I agree with you 100%.
How do we make that happen? I mean, I see the gulch, and I feel like it's another missed opportunity. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a phenomenal development, but I think there's opportunities for municipalities to provide for its residents. And I'm not talking about giving them nothing. You have long-term folks, but I believe it's the municipality's responsibility to the community.
So let me just say this. We're now talking about the Gulfs. We've talked about, to some extent, to a limited degree, the Beltline. What I'm suggesting is that those were not the first missed opportunities. There have been others. And at some point, you have to recognize a pattern of behavior. And so if you think about the very beginning of this conversation, I talked about public policy. What is the policy to benefit the public? Who is accountable for that policy and enforcing it?
So does the policy tend to lean towards those with the purse strings? Obviously.
Obviously.
How because again, we're looking and headed towards zero wealth as a community over the next 25 years. The level of disinvestment, disengagement, disadvantage, it grows, it compounds, just like compound interest. The disadvantage compounds.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I mean, the entity that provides the subsidy, the incentive, is responsible for the resulting use of that subsidy or that incentive. Clearly. However, who's who's accountable for the entity?
What do you see as the solution moving forward based on everything that you've done?
And the solution to what? Wait. The solution to what? I mean, I'm just a little old person. The solution to, there's a lot we could be talking about today that needs solutions, right?
Trying to bridge generational wealth. So it'll take 500 years to close the wealth gap. What kind of incremental progress can we look forward to, or strategy?
So this is my approach in situation. Okay. I can only talk about me. Let me talk about me here as my answer to this question. I do what I can do. So when I'm in a position to do something, I use that position to do the thing I said I would do. Now, I do have a worldview that I bring to that, and I make no excuses for it, and I'm very upfront about it. The problem is there are others who end up in positions that don't have that worldview. And so they don't use the position to advocate for, to ensure, to create the kind of opportunity that you're talking about.
So is that short-sighted or self-serving?
It's both. It is both. And it's both. It's both. It's the gamut.
It just, as I travel the country and I hear the stories and I see development or lack thereof with long-term community impact, it's heartbreaking.
Yes, it is. And I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. It's heartbreaking specifically in Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta's supposed to be the Mecca. And, I've been here 18 years and it's home for me and it feels good. But the opportunities, either you're in the clique or you're not in the clique.
So I'm going to use the quote that my beloved husband's. So I'm going to say something he said to me when I was first considering not going back to New York and staying in the South and considering Atlanta as my next place to be. Okay. And what he said was Atlanta's greatest challenge is to live up to its image.
Mm.
It was true when he said it when I met him in 1973, and it was true when he died in 2010.
I think what happens me with my family being here, growing up, coming back and forth up down 75, it was always really romantic. As a young adult, my brother went to Morehouse. I would come down here, hang out, had plenty of good times. Living here, I do none of the stuff that I used to do when I was visiting here. I don't even see the same people. And I think the fabric there, but there's a lot of opportunities here. Um, it's just it's conflicting because it's okay. I do good. I'm gonna do good in the middle of the ocean, but other people don't have the same opportunity or fortitude, and I feel like it's incumbent upon us to make sure everybody does well.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that.
And one of the reasons why I tend to spend my time and energies focusing on young folks is because they have a chance.
Yeah.
And that's just where my hopes are. But in that intergenerational connectivity, sometimes, and you've done so much, and hopefully we can have some more conversations because whenever I get to talk to you, I'll never want to let you go. You got to kick me off. But the wealth of knowledge that you bring and the fact that you left and went to California, I mean, you deserve to do whatever you want to do at this point. But the city still needs you.
Well, let me just say this, and it's connected to the point I was just making. You know, Atlanta excels at boosterism. It promotes itself as this thing that to a great extent it's not. Or to a great extent it is for just some folks.
That part,
The
right there.
fact that you, unprompted by me, characterized it as the Black Mecca is really interesting since at least for the last 15 years, and at this point I just have kind of disconnected, but at least for the last 15 years, 13, 12 out of those 15 years, Atlanta has been the most inequitable city in the country.
Is
Okay,
that because so
let me finish my point. Let me
okay.
finish my point.
I'm sorry.
Now, the only reason it hasn't been consistently the most inequitable city for the last 15 years is because every now and then another city will pop up and be number one, and Atlanta will be number two. So it'll be like Philadelphia now is number one, not because of anything Atlanta did, but because of something Philadelphia did or didn't do, right? So when you think about the Black Mecca and you think about the level of inequity, and think about what that's saying. It said the most inequitable city. That means you're more inequitable than New York, Chicago, DC, LA. It's like, how is that possible? It is the most inequitable city. And instead of trying to reconcile those two things with, some effort at public policy, at some community-wide, and when I say community, I mean philanthropic, political, business, corporate, resident, the community coming together to try to solve this problem. It just keeps promoting Black Mecca, the cultural, but nothing I contend nothing of substance is happening to address that gap.
That's
So I left. So one of the reasons I left is I don't abide hypocrisy well, and I just couldn't stay trying to work on something when none of my efforts seemed to interest anyone else with any authority or any ability to change it. So I'm going to close out our conversation because it's 12:17. I'm going to close our conversation. We'll have another one with, I think a more accurate description of Atlanta is not a city too busy to hate, which is part of its boosterism thing. It's really a city too busy to care.
Wow.
And I just didn't want to be part of that. Because of what I've been doing for the last 40 years and trying to do things in a way that bridged that gap, I found that at every single turn, at every opportunity we had.
Maybe we need to just go ahead and tape a series.
We could do that.
Okay, me and Rick, we're gonna get that together so we can get a series with Miss Mtamanika Youngblood. So
that'll be fine.
Thank you so much again.
You're quite welcome. I'm sorry about the problem we had at the beginning, but
that's okay. We just glad you're here.
Doesn't like your vehicle, so
yeah. But we figured it out. So
we figured it out. All right, my dear. Well, take care. It's good seeing you.
Okay, good seeing you as well. Talk to you soon.
All righty. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like to know more about the 10,000 Black Appraisers mission, visit us at 10kba.com or visit our foundation website, 10,000 Appraisers Foundation, at 10kaf.org. The Thaddaus Dawson Speaks program is proud to be a part of the WUTU 88.3 FM radio family, providing the best in community radio. Stay tuned in locally, and until next week, you've been listening to Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, Liberation Through Valuation, where soul meets soil.
Another one too. The roots came back stronger, true. Now the street got a song, and it sings.